I'm going to say it was probably about 13 years ago where my family and I went to a place called the Warsaw Caves. Anyone ever been to the Warsaw Caves? One hand. I see that hand in the back. I'm not sure exactly what I expected. I certainly didn't have like these delusions that it was going to be like Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, these giant underground caverns and like that. But even with low expectations, I found myself disappointed with the Warsaw Caves. I think it barely qualifies as a tourist attraction. It felt to me like maybe there was a bunch of giant stones that kind of fell on each other in a way that if you looked really closely and carefully or crept through it closely enough, like there was just enough of a gap to crawl through like a tunnel. Like that's kind of how it felt to us. And so it's possible that further in, you make a turn and there's like a huge cavern there. We wouldn't know because none of us were willing to actually climb down. And we went on kind of a rainy day too. It wasn't the best day for it. But it was muddy, it was cold, it was unpleasant. And we were just overall disappointed with the experience. Now, has anyone here been to the Bonshare Caves? Much better, much better. I mean, there's actually like a cave. You can stand up and walk around in it, and it's just, it was much more what I thought it was going to be. But at the same time, it was kind of cold, as caves tend to be inside. You wouldn't want to spend the night in the Bonshare Caves. Now, I've heard that there are some people who love this thing called spelunking, where they just live to go underground into these caves. By the way, the largest spider I've ever seen in like real life, not on TV, was at the Warsaw Caves. So that's another thing that goes against it. If those things are on the ground, I'm not interested in being there. But and I just can't imagine what else is in like these giant caves. But I've heard these horror stories where people choose to go into a cave where like the only way to get into it is to put all the air out of your body so you can squeeze through. Because if you breathe in the middle, you're going to get trapped and stuck. Not my idea of a good time. I don't know about you. Maybe some of you are like, awesome, sign me up. More power to you, but it's not for me. It just sounds absolutely horrible. However, as bad as those experiences might be, I might prefer to go into one of those caves than to be in some of the other caves that I've been in. And I'm guessing maybe you've been in them too. And I'm not talking now about literal caves. I'm talking about metaphorical caves, maybe emotional caves, spiritual caves. A lot of us have experienced this kind of a cave. Sometimes we hide. For whatever reason, we just want the world to not see us, and so we put ourselves into this metaphorical cave. Sometimes we carry shame that we don't want anyone else to see, and so we go into the cave. Life beats us down, and we feel defeated. Or sometimes it just feels like everything around you just feels like death. And so you go into this cave, and you feel like death is creeping at the door, and there's no way out. Because that's the thing, when you're in a cave, it's all you can see. All around you is the cave. It's hard to see anything else, hard to see the light, hard to see the hope, hard to see any way forward, much less the way out. But I want there to be hope here. I want us to understand, for those who are in the cave right now, that there is hope for those in the cave. And this morning I want to talk about a man who found himself in a cave. This is one of those Sunday mornings where I'm not doing part of a series. This is just a one-off. And I know that I tend, when I have just a one chance to speak one time, I run to David. David is my all-time favorite character in the Bible, not named Jesus. I've mentioned that a number of times. When I was a kid in church and it was boring, I would open my book and read about David because his life is just so fascinating to me. And so this story takes place in roughly 1058. We figure sometime in that area. I was going to say British Columbia, before Christ. 1058 BC. It takes place in Israel, in a few different places, but specifically in a place called the Cave of Adullam. And so we start the story in 1 Samuel 21, starting in verse 10. A little backstory here. David has had an amazing run. Like he was anointed to be king. Most people didn't know that, but he went out, he fought the giant, defeated the giant, and suddenly his stock was on the rise. And he brought him to the palace, and he was there to be Saul's. Basically, he would play his harp whenever Saul was having a rough day, and so he got to be in the throne room with the king and spend time with the king. The king loved him so much that he actually gave him his daughter to be married. And people started singing songs about how great David was. He became a soldier and a leader of men. And incredible, incredible stories of what an amazing leader he was, what an amazing soldier he was. And it seems like he's at the height of his popularity. And that was the problem. Because they sang these songs that Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. I don't know how the tune goes. I wouldn't sing it, by the way. But Saul heard this. And he thought, David is more popular than I am. And that's a dangerous place to be when you've got a jealous king. And so Saul starts chasing after David, and he wants to kill him. He literally tries to kill him on a number of occasions. And David is just on the run. So we get to verse 10. It says, David escaped from Saul and went to King Achish of Gath. Now, I mentioned earlier that David killed Goliath, the giant. Goliath came from Gath. So he goes to Goliath's hometown. Like, you have to be at the very end of your rope, almost rock bottom, for you to go to the house of your ancient enemy to look for a rescue. That's where David's at. He runs from Saul. He goes to King Achish of Gath. By the way, he's at this time also carrying Goliath's sword. But the officers of Achish were unhappy about his being there. No kidding. Isn't this David, the king of the land, they asked? No, he wasn't. Saul was the king, but you can see David's popularity was higher even than Saul's. They asked, isn't he the one the people honor with dances, singing, Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000s? By the way, most of those 10,000s meant, probably a bit of a high number, but would have been Philistines. There's a good chance that some of these people who are saying this had friends or family that was killed by David and his men. So they're not happy about him being there. And David heard these comments, and he was very afraid of what King Achish of Gath might do. Like he's thrown this Hail Mary pass, and it's not working out for him. And so he changes tack right away. He pretended to be insane, scratching on doors and drooling down his beard. Like he says, the only way I'm going to get out of this is if they see me as not a threat. Basically, this is his insanity plea. He's scratching on the door. He's drooling on his beard. Particularly in that culture, this would probably have sealed the deal for him. People were really particular about their beard. I know right now mustaches are kind of the in thing, but in those days, your beard was like your glory. And so for him to drool on his beard, it would have been just like, no one would do that unless they were absolutely crazy, or in David's case, absolutely desperate. So finally, King Achish says to his men, must you bring me a madman? We already have enough of them around here, which is actually a really funny line. But he says, why should I let someone like this be my guest? So he's gone from being super popular to a threat against Saul to now a threat against the Philistines to being absolutely dismissed because he's pretending to be insane. He's no longer a threat to the king. And he says, get him out of my sight. I don't want him here. So David has really nowhere to go. And so he goes to a cave. The place is called the Cave of Adullam, and doesn't really matter. He could have gone to any cave. Adullam means God's justice. It's a town nearby this cave, and maybe he's going there thinking, that's what my only hope here is that if God takes matters into his own hands and brings me justice. Because David hadn't done anything wrong. But David left Gath and escaped to the Cave of Adullam. We're now in chapter 22. And something happens that for most people might have been a positive. But for David, I'm not so sure. I mean, if he wasn't at rock bottom before, you got to think, well, he must be rock bottom going to the cave, but I think things actually get worse for him. It says, soon his brothers and all his other relatives joined him there. And you think, well, that's probably a good thing, right? And for most people, I think it would be, and it's possible it was for David at this point. But if you look at the history of David's relationship with his family, it's not very good. David is treated like the runt of the litter. When Samuel comes to anoint one of the sons of Jesse, David doesn't even get an invitation to the party. He's left out minding the sheep. Finally, they bring him in, and it turns out he's the one that Samuel wants to anoint. But every time we see any interaction with him and his family, it is pretty negative. Like his brothers talk down to him. He's dismissed easily. And so now David has escaped to a cave. His brothers and all the other relatives show up there, probably because they've had to escape as well. They probably know that their lives are in danger just as much as David's is. No one wants to live in a cave, and you might be kind of bitter at the person who's forcing you into that situation. So surely that must be rock bottom for David. But I argue it gets worse. Next verse says, then others began coming. Again, you might think this is a good thing. People are rallying to David's cause, but look who shows up. Men who are in trouble or in debt or who are just discontented. Not exactly the who's who of people you want to surround yourself with. Like, yeah, you would love to have some people partner with you, but people who are in trouble or in debt or discontented, how long before they're discontented with you? How long until the actions that have caused them to get into the situation they're in start to affect you as well? It says, until David was the captain of about 400 men. An overwhelming number of people. Also, David, if he's in charge, he's now got to feed these people. He's got to look after them. Like, it just piles on top. And I would argue this is David's rock bottom, at least at this point in his life. Well, let's talk about caves for a minute. The very first time the word cave comes up in the Bible, shortly after the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot and his daughters, this is Genesis 19, afterward Lot left a place called Zoar. So Sodom and Gomorrah get blown up. Lot escapes just by the skin of his teeth. His wife, turns back. She turns into a pillar of salt. So it's just Lot and his daughters. And they go to a city called Zoar. But it says, afterward Lot left Zoar because he was afraid of the people there. So Lot goes into hiding in a cave. That's the very first time we see the word cave. It's not positive. Almost every time you see the word cave in the Bible, it is a negative experience. He's afraid of the people. He goes into hiding, and it gets worse. The rest of that verse says, he went to live in a cave in the mountains with his 2 daughters. I'm not going to go into the story here, but if you know the story, you know what happens in that cave. The daughters get Lot drunk, and incestuous relationships happen, the outcome of which are 2 nations that are enemies ongoing for the people of Israel. Just shameful things happening. So you've got the cave, which is the cave of hiding. You've got now the cave of shame. In the book of Joshua, we hear about 5 kings who are on the run, 5 enemy kings, but they all go and they hide in a cave. And so a cave is a place where you go when you're defeated. A cave is a place you go when you're hiding. It's a place of shame. It's a place of defeat. And lastly, the very first land that Abraham bought in the promised land. God called him and said, I have a place for you. It's a promised land. He finally gets a little piece of it. It's a cave. Genesis 23. Abraham buried his wife, Sarah, there in Canaan, in the cave of Machpelah, near Mamre, also called Hebron. Cave is a place of hiding, a place of shame, a place of defeat, and a place of death. And that is where David is. Rock bottom, surrounded by people who are probably bitter with him, people who are malcontents, people who are in debt. What does David do? He writes a psalm, Psalm 142. It says this is a psalm of David regarding his experience in the cave. We know it's the Cave of Adullam. He says, I cry out to the Lord. I plead for God's mercy. When David has nowhere else to turn, he turns to the one who he knows he can always turn to. He cries out to the Lord, saying, God, have mercy on me. I'm surrounded on every side. The location he is like halfway between where Saul's people are and where the Philistines are. He has no mercy from anybody except hopefully from the Lord. I pour out my complaints before him and I tell him all my troubles, because who else is going to listen? When I am overwhelmed, You alone know the way I should turn. Wherever I go, my enemies have set traps for me. I'm sure that's the way he's feeling. Like every turn he goes to, like every place he runs, looking for hope, looking for escape, there's somebody there who wants to get him. Everywhere he goes. And so now he comes to the only one who's going to help him out. The only one who knows which way he should turn. He is overwhelmed. He is feeling just at his absolute lowest point. I look for someone to come and help me, but no one gives me a passing thought. It was not that long ago they were singing his praises, and now no one even thinks about him, except for to try to get him. At least that's the way David feels about it. And the feelings are important, aren't they? In our family, we have this saying that feelings are always real, but they may not be true. David feels this. Maybe there's others who are still on his side. It's possible they may turn to him, but the way he feels is completely alone. He's surrounded by 400 people, but he feels completely alone. And I wonder if there might be some people who are feeling that right now. Surrounded with people, but you feel alone. No one will help me. No one cares a bit about what happens to me. I know there's probably a lot of you who have felt that way. Maybe you feel that way right now. So what do? You do what David did. Then I pray to you, O Lord. I say, you are my place of refuge. You are all I really want in life. David had nowhere to go, and so he ran and escaped to a cave, but the cave was not his place of refuge. That's where he was. It's his lowest point, but he knows that God is the only one who is his place of refuge. He says, take everything else away from me. You are all I really want. All I need is God in my life. Hear my cry, for I am very low. Rescue me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. Like David knows that this is the only place he can go for help. Bring me out of prison so I can thank you. Again, metaphorical prison. He's in a cave, but bring me out of prison so I can thank you. I want to get to the other side of this so I can say publicly, this is what God has done for me. The godly will crowd around me, for you are good to me. And some commentators think that he's probably looking around at the 400 people in debt, people in trouble, discontented, but beginning to see that these are the people who are going to become the godly that will surround me. This is the beginning of my army, my nation. These are the ones who are looking to me for leadership, and as I continue to grow, I'm going to become their king. And what we see is these are the people who become his mighty men, his warriors, the people he can count on. They go from being who they were to being who they're going to become, with David as a leader. The godly will crowd around me, for you are good to me. And that's where Psalm 142 ends. David, a man crying in a cave, crying out to God in a cave. And that's the way it was for thousands of years. People hid in caves. People went there in shame. They went there in defeat and death. Until one day when Jesus walked up to a cave. John 11. Jesus was still angry as he arrived at the tomb. This is the tomb of his friend Lazarus. A cave with a stone rolled across the entrance. And he yells, "Come out of that cave." His friend was dead, but he came back to life. In that moment, Jesus transforms the meaning of the cave. It's no longer a place of hiding, a place of shame, a place of defeat, and a place of death. It's now a place of rebirth, new life. It wasn't that long after that Jesus was himself in a cave, and he changed the meaning of caves forever. And again, I'm not talking about literal, I'm talking about metaphorical. The cave was a place of hiding, shame, defeat, and death, but in Jesus, it becomes a place where you are known, restored, victorious, and alive. That's the difference Jesus makes. Thousands of years, that's what the cave meant, but in that one moment when Jesus comes back to life, he changes it forever. Romans 10:8 tells us that if you openly declare that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. That's putting our hope and everything in the moment that Jesus came back to life. I mean, it's what we've been talking about last week with Easter and Good Friday. But if you openly declare that Jesus is Lord, not just your Savior, but your Lord, and you believe in your heart that God raised from the dead, you will be saved. If you believe that Jesus changed the meaning of the caves, you will be saved. And that's the first step, but we need to go further. If we want to be fully known, we need to step out of the cave of hiding. So let's get honest with God and with each other. Let's stop hiding about who we are and what we've done. Let's open up and find the freedom of being fully known and fully loved. If you want to be completely restored, you need to let Jesus carry your shame. It starts with confession. And it's easy to be vague about confession. Forgive me for my sins. But let's get specific. Give it to Jesus and let it go. If you really want to find freedom, do what James talks about and confess to one another. Find an accountability partner, someone who's going to walk with you. I'll let Jesus carry your shame. If you want to live in victory, you need to recognize that it only comes in Jesus. The very moment that seemed like his defeat is when Jesus won the victory. When Jesus went into that grave, it seemed like it was over, but when he came back out, it changed everything. So we need to live in obedience to him and live in his victory. And if you want to be truly alive, you need to give your life to Jesus. Jesus talks about a full and abundant life, and what that looks like is surrender to the one who gives eternal life. Not just a rescue from death, but an invitation to truly live. Some of you are still living in a cave that Jesus has called you out of. You're saved, but you're still hiding. You're forgiven, but you're still carrying shame. You're free, but you're still living defeated. And you're alive, but you're just going through the motions. And Jesus wants more for you. He's calling your name. He's saying, come out of that cave. Invite our worship team to come back up.